back. I'm talking to Niall Gardner, who's over there in Washington. He's the director of the Heritage Foundation think tank that, as you may have discerned if you were listening before that break, is the organisation that's trying to get Prince Harry's visa application form made public to find out whether or not he lied about his drug use, his illegal drug use. But I'm glad I've got him because we could talk about the big story of the day, Niall, and that is that President Trump has just completed a 90-minute phone call with Vladimir Putin in Moscow, and I guess that the portents seem quite good. They have apparently agreed a 30-day partial ceasefire in Ukraine, which would involve the Russians agreeing to stop bombing and attacking energy and infrastructure. So there would be a ceasefire in terms of power stations, etc., etc. This ceasefire partial agreement will be in effect for 30 days. Talks for a permanent peace will begin immediately in the Middle East. And here comes the rub. Although Putin told Trump that he has several conditions he wants met in order for the fighting to end. What's your take on this? I mean, will it come to anything? I mean, I don't want to be a pessimist. I'm a big admirer of Donald Trump and what he's doing in trying to achieve peace around the world. But not so long ago, I seem to remember he was achieving peace in Gaza, talking about the Gazan Riviera, the Riviera of the Middle East and all that. And we know what's happened to that ceasefire overnight. Israel has launched heavy airstrikes on Hamas. The war seems to be back on, and Hamas is saying they suffered 400 casualties, 400 fatalities. So that peace doesn't seem to be going too well in Gaza. What's your take on their 90-minute chat about Ukraine? Are you optimistic that this will lead to peace?
Well, I think it's a positive first step. I'm bearing in mind, of course, dealing with the Russians, especially the treacherous Putin regime, is very difficult, and we're dealing with a very, very hostile, aggressive actor in Moscow, and we've seen the barbarism and the savagery that Putin's regime is capable of in Ukraine and other parts of the world as well. Donald Trump clearly wants to bring an end to the war as swiftly as possible to save large numbers of lives. He made this a key campaign promise, actually, when he was running for the presidency, and he's now seeking to deliver that. And I think in many ways, I mean, Donald Trump is the only figure in the world who can actually negotiate an end to the war. Trump made a pledge to the American people that he would do so, and he's now, I think, doing all he possibly can. I do think it's an encouraging early start in terms of the negotiating process. And as White House officials made clear today, there were no concessions made to the Russians. Trump has made it absolutely clear that Russia needs to come to the negotiating table. Otherwise, they may well face potentially crippling sanctions from the United States. So, Putin clearly fears American global power. Putin doesn't fear the European Union or Ursula von der Leyen or Emmanuel Macron, but he fears Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And I think that U.S. power here makes all the difference. And Trump wants to save as many, especially Ukrainian lives, as possible. In fact, he issued a statement on social media just a few days ago, urging the Russians to hold off from attacking retreating Ukrainian forces and to spare their lives. And so, this is a president who I think is very concerned about saving Ukrainian lives, and the Russians all along. I mean, they behaved in an immensely barbaric fashion. But the reality is that Trump is having to negotiate with an odious villain like Vladimir Putin to end the war, and that's just the reality that Washington faces right now.
There's also talk of a kind of maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, all around Odessa and everything, which would allow cargo to transport more easily around that troubled area. And this is interesting, Niall. The White House is indicating that Vladimir Putin may join Donald Trump and America in a statement of support for Israel over Iran. That would be significant.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I've not seen the details on this, but I have to say that the Russian regime under Putin has been a big supporter in the past of the Iranian regime, and if Putin's going to back off from backing the mad mullahs of Tehran, the only reason for that is because of US power, and Donald Trump, represents a strong, decisive US leadership on the world stage, as we saw with the US airstrikes against the Houthi rebels, who are armed, funded, backed by the Iranian regime, and of course Iran, in many respects, has been a client state of Moscow in recent years. So the fact that the United States under Donald Trump is really whacking the daylights out of the Houthis, and also whacking the interests of the Iranian regime, that directly hits actually the interests of Russia and Putin as well. And so it's very good to see the United States undermining, of course, Russian interests in the Middle East. And that's something that Joe Biden never did at all. In fact, Biden appeased the Iranian regime, did nothing, frankly, about Russian support for Iran. But I think the Russians realize that with Donald Trump, he's a far tougher figure than Joe Biden or Barack Obama before him.
Do you think that the real stumbling block may come in terms of Putin's territorial demands, which may prove a bit much for Zelensky in Ukraine? I think that Ukraine will roll over for Russia's refusal to let them join NATO. I don't think that's going to be a massive problem. But territorially, I think I hope Trump succeeds here. We all want to see an end to that horrific war, the horrible killing fields in the East, where hundreds of thousands of young men are dying in horrific circumstances. We all want to see that end, but you wonder just how committed to the peace process Putin really is. Putin, I think, is one of those people who's perfectly capable of telling you to your face, I guarantee you I'll do this, and then the next day he'll do something else, something different. I think that might be a worry. And, it's like Ronald Reagan said, peace is easy. All you've got to do is surrender. I think that Zelensky might take that view, that Trump is steering him towards what effectively for Ukraine will be a kind of surrender, giving Putin all the territory he wants, agreeing not to join NATO, etc., etc. Do you fear that Putin's demands might be let me put it another way. Do you think Putin might compromise on some of his demands?
That's a very good question, and we should never underestimate, I think, what Putin is capable of doing in terms of his aggressiveness and his complete disregard for the free world and for human life, frankly. And what the Russians have done in Ukraine is absolutely appalling. The reality, I think, and Zelensky, has acknowledged this, publicly. It's incredibly hard to get back the territory the Russians have taken, about 20% of the country. In order to take that territory back, that would involve a war on a massive scale by the West to retake it. And I don't think there's any appetite for that in the United States, or indeed in Europe as well. It would be World War III, frankly, to take back that territory. Hopefully, a future Russian regime post-Putin would view things perhaps somewhat differently. But right now, we are dealing with a Putin war machine that is vicious and brutal, and to get the Russians out of that remaining Ukrainian territory is incredibly difficult, and it would involve, frankly, a World War III style scenario, and that's not something that Donald Trump is prepared to take the United States towards, and I think that frankly, few leaders in Europe would do the same as well. So it's an incredibly difficult situation. It's a tragic situation for Ukraine. I don't think that the Russians would have invaded Ukraine if Trump had been the president at that time. They saw Biden as incredibly weak. Biden did nothing to deter the Russian invasion. And Trump did actually send a large amount of military equipment, missiles, etc., to the Ukrainians when he was president. Barack Obama refused to send any military support to the Ukrainians when he was president. And so, I think Putin took advantage of what he perceived to be American weakness when Biden became president. And so we're in this terrible situation that we're facing today. And I think that it's of course very tragic for the Ukrainians, but I think that Zelensky has accepted the reality of the situation. The priority right now is to ensure the Russians don't take any more territory, that they don't take many more Ukrainian lives. Ukrainians have fought incredibly bravely and courageously for their freedom, and we need to stop this Russian aggression, and a negotiated settlement seems to be the only way to do that right now.
Absolutely. What worries me is that Putin, this partial ceasefire deal seems pretty encouraging, but what worries me is that Putin has made it clear that he has several conditions he wants met in order for the fighting to end completely. It is those several conditions around which this entire issue will revolve and the future will hinge. Niall, excellent to talk to you, and we'll keep in touch about Prince Harry, obviously. Thank you so much for your time. Good to talk. Niall Gardner, Director of the Heritage Foundation there over in Washington. He's an American citizen, by the way. Doesn't sound like one, does he? I'm sure he's a British citizen as well. So interesting times.